Hey everyone, thank you for joining us back on AWS On Air. Today, we're going to be talking about something really cool. But first, who am I? Whom is speaking? I'm Kyle Dickinson. I'm with the AWS Customer Incident Response Team, where we support customers during active security events. And today, I am joined by some awesome folks. Got another host here. Who is this other host?
Hey, I'm AM Grabelny. You asked a really hard question there, Kyle. Who am I? That's like I toil with that on a daily basis.
Existential crisis.
Yeah, I mean, basically, for a long time now. I'm AM Grabelny. I'm an AWS on-air host as well. I am a solution architect here at AWS. And Pratik, we're so honored to have you with us. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're here to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. My name is Pratik Parekh. I am a product manager on Amazon Elastic File System or Amazon EFS. And I'm here to talk about what we've launched at EFS and what's exciting at EFS.
Well, the sun is on my face, as you can see. I'm getting my ears filled with EFS. It's a good day. I'm excited, Pratik. So I'm going to go ahead and say that EFS stands for Elastic File System, and I'm
That's,
right there.
that's
Yeah,
correct. Absolutely.
points for Gryffindor.
Trivia. Boom.
Yes, wonderful. Now, file systems, Pratik, though, like when we talk about file systems, uh, I'm a developer in my background. I'll be honest with you, I haven't worked deeply with file systems. Obviously, had files, and file systems to store those files in, and move those files around and done stuff like that. But like, where am I seeing that in my day to day job? Like, where are customers caring about file systems today that EFS can slot in and maybe solve some problems for our customers?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I mean, we've all been sort of exposed to file systems one way or the other via filers or whatever on our computers. Like file systems are basically a good way to store unstructured data, right? So you have all our applications, or not all, but like a lot of our applications are currently sort of designed in a way where they're like opening up a file, reading some data off of it, processing it. So if you're thinking about those applications, any sort of applications, such as your web pages, such as your data sets for your machine learning workloads, etc., they all use files in some form or the other. So that's where the file system comes into the picture.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so a lot of tools are built to interact with file systems. You mentioned like open, close. These are actions at an operating system level that have to exist for some of these tools to actually function. So it makes sense why you then need a file system. But then why EFS? Like, what role does EFS play within connecting my tools to a file system?
Yeah, so EFS, as we said, like is Elastic File System. It's basically a simple serverless set and forget file system for you to use on AWS Cloud. You can easily scale up and down this file system. So it grows as you add files to it, and then it shrinks as you remove files from it. It can grow up to petabytes. So you never really have to worry about managing this file system. It does all of this automatically, and you only pay what you use. So as you shrink, you don't have to worry about provisioning, your storage, and you're only sort of paying what you use actually.
So it grows as you have more files and then shrinks, so it kind of right size. So are you telling me like the days of defragmenting your file system are over now?
Exactly. You don't have to worry about it. We worry about all of that stuff.
Oh, perfect. That's how I passed the time as a kid. I had an interesting childhood, but anyway, no, that sounds great because setting and forgetting, that's the way I like to live my lifestyle. Just give it, data, grow it when it needs to, bring it back when I delete all my cat memes or dog photos or videos of my
Delete?
daughter.
How dare you?
I mean,
I'm just kidding, Kyle.
Dogs.
You would never delete the dog memes, would
No,
you?
I wouldn't. He's right there,
Okay,
actually, just
okay.
chilling.
What about, so we talked about some of the older tools, maybe like a WordPress, for example. WordPress often requires a file system. When I'm thinking about newer things that I'm building, so let's say I'm building in serverless or containers and I require a file system, where does EFS help me there?
Yeah. So let's say you have I'll talk about an example here. Basically, let's say you have an image processing sort of or a video processing application, right? Now these files are
Like a red light camera.
So yeah, exactly. And these files are huge, right? So so you need some sort of a storage to kind of store these files, a persistent storage to store these files. And you talked about containerized applications, right? Or serverless applications like Lambda functions, for example, which basically perform different functions on these images or videos that you're storing, right? So Lambda doesn't probably have the capacity to store these hundreds of gigs of data. So you need some sort of persistent store, and you need probably hundreds, maybe thousands of these Lambda functions connecting to your file system all at the same time, doing different things. EFS allows you to do that, right? So that's where EFS is sort of modern in that sense. It's coming, like, it's making use of the file system construct in the cloud.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, for me, one of the big, when I first started working with cloud, one of the coolest things to me was decoupling compute from storage, right? Because these two things you would often have to scale together in the past, and it didn't work very well, right? Because you would often have to buy larger stuff because you had more things to store, but then you wouldn't use the compute in an efficient way. But decoupling, right? Like, and I think we first saw this with S3, right? Decoupling storage away from compute really, really helps you to fine tune your applications and really use the most out of it. And so this is awesome to hear that you could do the same type of thing, but still maintain a file system, right? That will scale for you. That's really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of just, always constantly over provisioning, because it was just like, okay, well, I'm projecting I'm going to use this much storage over a period of time, and then, a year goes by and you're like, I didn't even hit 50% of what I had provisioned. But then when you look at modernizing, I know, so security background, when I wanted to create some security controls to do like responsive controls and be able to write to a file or, grab some data and store it somewhere, it was a trigger to trigger something like a serverless, Lambda function. But then where could I write that piece of information that would remain persistent and then constantly be able to iterate it over or access it over time? And it sounds like EFS is going to be that way. And, what are some of the other like common use cases that you're seeing? Because I could think of very security centric use cases. But I know that there's just beyond that. I'm very simple individual. What are like the complex things you can do with EFS?
How about, we talked a little bit about machine learning, right? So machine learning workloads typically have, let's say, two phases, like the training phase and the inference phase. The training phase is where you store like vast sort of amounts of data sets, which are used to kind of train your model. EFS is a good place to store that data. And then the output of that training is your model and the artifacts of that model, which again can live on EFS. And then that way you have your training data and your models all living in one place. So imagine your data scientists or engineers whose job is not to manage the infrastructure, but their job is to work, on those machine learning models. Now have this one place, they mount a file system, and they can easily, let's say, debug. They can test their models easily. So those are some of the interesting use cases in today's world. That file systems and EFS kind of solve efficiently.
Now that sounds like something that could be, impacted by like read latencies. I'm not a storage guru by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems like something like a machine learning model. You would want to be able to access that information as fast as possible to process it because, depending on the size of the model, the latency could just be brutal.
Yeah.
And I'm also very impatient too.
So let me jump right into one of the exciting launches that we performed earlier this year. Basically, we launched sub-millisecond read latencies for EFS file systems. So that allows our customers to basically read their files, within less than a millisecond on an average, which basically, as you rightly mentioned, right, exponentially increases your your speed of processing these large workloads, such as your ML models.
Wow, that's impressive. Sub-millisecond.
That's fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and it's not just the ML models, right? I mean, think about your going back to the web pages, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Your
you prob-
CMS.
yeah, your CMS systems. You're probably using, as you already mentioned, WordPress or Drupal or Confluence. These applications are read-heavy applications. They basically typically load static web pages one after the other, and they have thousands of people accessing them or thousands of clients accessing them all at the same time. The sub-millisecond latencies allow our customers to provide their customers with snappy web pages and quick access. And then think about some other workloads like analytics, right? Where like let's say you're running Grafana or Apache Airflow, they perform a lot of ETL type of operations. But once the data is transformed, there is a lot of read happening on that transformed data. Again, uh, you know, having those complex calculations being available to customers within a millisecond is a huge win for our customers.
So one thing that always kind of concerned me about any sort of file system though is if that, if my RAID array were to, go down or my controller were to just kaput, my data could be potentially lost. Or, we could talk about it, RAID structures and redundancy until the sun goes down, which it looks like it almost is for AM. But
Yeah. It's close.
But how is it that we're addressing this sort of concern? Because again, security hat. How are we addressing the ability to make sure that our data is available if something were to happen?
Yeah. So data protection is a huge track lane for us at EFS, right? EFS inherently um, copies your data redundantly to store it across AZs. But as you mentioned, there could be a natural disaster. There could be any sort of these external events that make your data in your region unavailable, which is why we launched EFS replication again earlier this year, which allows our customers to copy their file system, make a physical copy of their file system uh, from one place to any other region of their choice, and basically sort of satisfy their DR or compliance requirements in doing so.
And that's a huge win too, because I know AM developer by nature. You probably got all your infrastructure codified, right? So
Of course.
you need to go over to another region. You just spin up your CloudFormation template, but the data's already there.
How could you even question it if everything I touch is infrastructure as code? Always, of course. I start with it. Definitely. Don't have any infrastructure that I did in the console. Never.
No launch wizard security groups.
No. Stop accusing me. Sorry, I'm a little sensitive there for some reason. Anyway, Pratik, I know you've got a demo for us too, and we're getting. I want to make sure we cover that too. Are you ready to show us this stuff
Yeah.
in
So
action?
yeah. So yeah, I'm still going to pull up the console to show this demo.
Console ops, baby.
So let
We
me.
can see it.
Can you see my console? Okay.
We
We can see
can.
your console.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do here is quickly show you and our customers how to set up EFS replication, right? So EFS replication allows you to create a copy of a file system in a different region easily. Now you can do this on an existing file system or a new file system as you create it. Here, let me just quickly go through the workflow of creating a new file system within a couple of clicks, and then enabling replication on top of it.
And
So
one thing I want to highlight, you mentioned that this can be done on existing file systems, the
exactly,
replication piece, right? And so
yes,
that, to me, that's huge because one thing I think of is, if you have a service rolled out and then you go back and you're just thinking, oh, the sensitivity of this data has changed since we initially rolled this out. We need to have a redundant copy of it in a different location to meet certain regulatory requirements or whatever your organization may have. You're not like shoehorned and have to migrate a bunch of things. And, so it sounds like it's pretty straightforward to enable it on existing EFS deployments, right?
absolutely, yeah. And I'm going to show
Beautiful.
that. Yeah, I'm going to show that as well if time permits. Um, because I have this file system on which replication is enabled. As you can see, the file system is moderately big. It has like 150 megabytes, so like maybe 5 photos on there. Um, but first, I'm going to just quickly create a new file system, um, and show you that within a couple clicks, I can just create a standard or a one zone file system. These are different storage classes we have in EFS.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the documentation you'd specify what the different use cases are for those two different types of options.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool.
One zone file system is a cost optimized file system uh, that has that is a single AZ file system. But as you can see here, I have my file system created immediately, and I can go to this replication tab here, and you have a create replication button. Again, within 2 clicks, you can actually create your replica file system. So as you can see, I am currently in the US West 2 region in Oregon. And let's say I want to create my my copy in Singapore. So I can just pick a region, and again pick the type of file system I want, maybe standard or one zone, and then I just hit create, and all uh, and that's all you have to do basically to enable replication on your file system. So any data that you add to this file system now will be replicated. We typically try to maintain a 15-minute RPO for most of our file systems. RPO is a recovery point objective. So
Hmm.
within 15 minutes, for most file systems, your data will be copied over to the destination site.
So you mentioned something there that sparked a question in my mind. You said from now on the objects will now be replicated. So if you had an existing file system of like 100, your existing one that you have that's 150 megs and probably full of awesome dog photos because dogs rule, um, and you didn't have replication enabled up to that point, would those five dog photos get replicated after you enabled replication, or only new files from the time that you enabled replication?
No, so we actually replicate everything
Ooh.
that's in your file system.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
I'm glad to have clarified that. Now, is there a way to report on where your replications, like the origin of the data is and the destination where it's going? Because I could see a question sparking in some folks' mind going, well, how can we make sure that data that needs to stay within a particular region of the world is not going outside of that region?
So when you create this replica file system, as you can
Hmm.
see here, you created a new file system in AP Southeast 1, which is
Okay.
the Singapore region. So your file system, your data is only being written into that file system, and that file system is a read-only file system. So as your data is being copied over, you can still access that file system as a read-only copy, but you can rest assured that that data is not moving into a different region. For I can understand for your sovereignty sort of compliance rules, you don't want the data to move away. And while this data is being transferred, it's transferred on the AWS backbone, and it's
Hmm.
encrypted in transit as well as encrypted on rest in the destination file system. So it's completely encrypted. You can provide the encryption keys for the data at rest encryption as well.
It looks like it's read only as well. So you can't go put in files in the Singapore region now and have that replicated. It's not a two-way replication, meaning then,
That's neat. Yes.
yeah. That's interesting.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just quickly going to say, if I have a minute, I can even show you the CloudWatch metric. So as I said, I had this old file system on which I had replication enabled. As you can see, that one is going from US West 2 to US East 1. But what I can do real quick is go to CloudWatch and show you that you can monitor the replication job that's running for that file system.
Love to hear it.
Yeah, so here I'm going into my CloudWatch console. And once it loads, I'll basically find my EFS metrics. So I'll just quickly go to all metrics, EFS here, and then we have a separate tag here called replication metrics, and then we'll click on that one. And as you can see, you have multiple, now you have two file systems here. I'm just quickly going to figure out which one is my old one. I think it's this one. And let me just beautify it just a little bit by changing this. So as you can see, the replication job was basically scheduled and running and copying files over. And then once it copies the file over, the time since last sync metric falls down, saying that, hey, I've synced everything up to this time, and now I'm going to start over again. So this time keeps building up as it's copying files over, and then it falls back down as it completes the replication job.
So I'm counting 17 dog photos.
Exactly. And once it copies those first 17 dog photos, it only copies the incremental ones, right? So it doesn't copy the whole file system over again.
That's awesome, Pratik. Now we are tight on time, so I have to move us to the end, unfortunately, and ask you, where do I go to learn more about EFS?
Yeah, so I think our docs are definitely a good place to learn about EFS. So docs.amazon.com/EFS. And I also want to quickly mention our GitHub page, the Amazon EFS Developer Zone, where you'll find a bunch of information, including workshops that you can use to get started with EFS and various features of EFS.
Awesome, man. Our moderators will go ahead and drop those links down so no one has to, try to grab a screenshot and quickly go to the webpage. We'll go ahead and drop those links for y'all.
Yes.
Great.
Developer Zone sounds like the place for me too. So I'm going to go check it out. Kyle, thanks for joining us as a host. Pratik, thanks for joining us as our guest. Stick around. We'll have a lot more for you here on AWS On Air.
And that's the truth.